Hello everybody, and welcome to FBS episode 14, the 14th part of the 6-part series where we build an international airport here in Cities Skylines as close as we can to realistic scale with all the deluxe features of some of the biggest and coolest looking airports in the world.
I can't believe how gorgeous these cinematics are.
Yeah, no, they're nice. I've been trying to step up my game recently, and it's definitely not just a black screen when we record this. Anyway, I'm bsquiklehausen, and with me here today, as always, is Strictoaster.
Hello.
And FluxTrans.
Hello.
And I just got the save from you, Flux, and immediately decided to work on something completely different than what you were doing. I've basically, as fun as detailing terminals and things are, I decided that I kind of got bit by the outside buildings bug in doing the fire training facility, my last episode, and thought it's time to go crazy and do a giant maintenance facility. I fly in and out of SFO a lot, and I've always loved they have this huge hangar in the back with a big lineup of planes outside, and I just thought, like, I need this. We need to make this in FBS. It's so cool. I ended up having to do a bunch of research, or not even getting to do a bunch of research on this giant hangar, and it's crazy, but more on that in a little while. Here I'm combining a whole bunch of Ronix's fantastic industrial buildings. One of them is actually a hangar that I requested he make. I asked him if he wouldn't mind doing a quick conversion of his logistics warehouse into an aviation hangar, like years ago. And well, a year ago when we were first planning this out, I was like, oh yeah, the series will be up in a couple weeks. But here we are, finally getting to use this. And
they do look good.
They look fantastic.
Yeah.
And what's great is that Ronix stays super consistent almost always with his assets. So it matches some of the stuff that we saw from the power plant. So I get to use some more power plant assets and end up being able to really piece together a very unique building. So moving on from
I see some familiar hangars there too that are not Ronix's.
Yes, yeah. So there are some side hangars and things that I'm just kind of placing out. I don't know if any of these assets will stay. There's a couple problem LODs with them, so I'm gonna do a little bit of research. This sort of area, just like the one at SFO, is a large maintenance hangar for multiple airlines. I think it's very cool. In SFO, half of the hangar is owned by United Airlines and the other half is American Airlines. So for this one, I decided it's going to be a split facility between all of the FBS airlines. So Strictoast Air, Flux Transport, JetBSQ, all together kind of combined for this. So it's kind of fun, and it's a cool way to feature kind of our airlines here. And my next sort of Maya project for FBS is going to be personalized signs for each of our halves of the of the hangars and things, which will be really fun. So look forward to that. But at the side of this whole facility, I'm also including the FBO, which is an acronym I think is like fixed base operations or something that I was thinking this morning. I need to look this up before we record and completely spaced on that. So oops. But it's basically a lot of where private jets and smaller airplanes will get their things sorted. So whether it's like pumping out the toilets or filling with fuel or even baggage services, they just manage that at multiple airports. So that's going to be something I make here as well. Or I make in this area in the future. I don't think I got to it this episode because I was doing a lot of experimenting with new assets, which took me longer than I anticipated. So since my last go around, at least, we've seen a whole bunch of really awesome airport assets come onto the workshop, whether they're blast shoulders or new service roads. And Flux, while yours is great, these new ones come in so many more varieties and everything. I just had to use them and give them a try. And these are all made by Mobius One, I believe. I think Vasmir has a version now, but I think I'm just using Mobius's at the moment. So thank you very much for those, because they and you'll see in the future we end up using these all over the place. So there's lots of...
just wait till the next episode.
There's lots of...
These...
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, are these all custom roads then? These are all just custom road networks that we're using for Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
which is fantastic. And as crazy as it is, we were beginning to approach the old prop limit, and now we're a lot safer. So right now I'm building a giant parking lot for the back of this facility, and unfortunately it doesn't get used quite as much as I thought it would. So now that we're kind of freeing up more props and things, I think I might do the old strategy and fill this thing up with prop cars. Just because in the real thing, it's actually full, and what I think is really interesting, or maybe a little frightening, is it's full of a lot of RVs, because that's what a lot of people that live at airports use, because they get to just live in their RV parked at the airport instead of having to go to like crappy hotels or very far to apartments and things. So
Wait, sorry. The people who work at the maintenance hangars like actually live in RVs at the airport? Is that what you're saying?
it's actually, I believe it's pilots and flight attendants, and they park in the same spot as people who work at the airport. I remember reading an article about this at LAX, actually, and there's a huge parking facility that's it's just turned into like an ad hoc RV park for air crews. So it's a little weird. Right here, I'm trying a new little technique of using parking lot roads just to give more variation to the tarmac, to the ramp here, which I think works really well because it gets the right amount of detail. It's about the right width for like a big tarmac patch where they actually use asphalt instead of concrete, and it definitely breaks up the repetitiveness of just plain concrete texture while also not costing a ton of props or decals. So it works really well. You do have to kind of live with a little bit of a curb on each side, but it's tiny, so it's very hard to see. I'm continuing more with a bunch of these docks just to break up the look and the kind of uniformity of this area. Because one thing I was really surprised about is that these taxiways and everything at SFO are filthy. They're like in really surprisingly bad condition in some places. So I come back to the parking lot here because I figured, like, wait a minute, parking lot roads, that reminds me I didn't actually finish the parking lot, so oh well.
Kind of an important detail.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, oh, it's just a big concrete or big asphalt patch at the back now. So I go through now, and now's when I really kind of get the filth on. And well, I thought I was. I looked at those cracks, but I'm trying to mimic the real life design sort of as closely as possible, but also add in sorts of where I changed it. So the real thing doesn't have that second taxiway exit up to a different area of taxiways. It's kind of scaled and shaped a little bit differently overall just to fit, because the real thing is crammed in by the bay, the actual San Francisco Bay, and we don't really have that restriction here. So I figured, like, you know what, let's freelance it a little bit. Let's kind of base it heavily off this one place at SFO, but then continue to kind of improvise stuff. Now here, I believe, might be the last ever taxiway done in stricto, your old style.
Oh my god, yeah, I literally gutted this. As we're recording this, I'm having another screen open, Cities Skylines. We're recording my next episode, and I am undoing all of this because we're replacing the taxiways with this new shoulder asset that looks freaking fantastic.
Yeah, it really does. So this is a really good small contained area to test this in, because it was just a few taxiways. They intersect the runway, they intersect each other in different ways, and it just ended up like really fantastic. Because what's nice is that instead of having to drag a concrete road and then layer that the right way and then drag a highway and layer that the right way and everything, it's just one drag. It seamlessly merges with the concrete pavement of the taxiways. The curves all look correct. We get the nice kind of characteristic trademark green taxiway edge. We also have other colors too, which is really nice for all that variation fun.
They were based on our technique, right? Kind of? I
think so. I remember the description for the workshop. So Mobius one watches the series, and I'm sure we can persuade him to leave a comment or something underneath. But he said this was inspired by what you were doing, Strict. Which, like, I mean, sorry to make all of your work completely irrelevant, but thank you.
much appreciated.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually.
At the same time. So right here, I placed another fire station. I guess I'm afraid that FBS is going to get caught on fire. So I have another little fire station out here in front, and I noticed that at SFO, where I was building, they actually did have a giant like road here with a bunch of white lines just to prevent people from parking there or stopping at all, which makes a ton of sense to me, just to make sure that nobody parks their car or stops their airplane where the fire trucks need to go. So I thought that that's kind of a nice detail that I'd never really thought of in an airport, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So there it is, basically. Continuing around, the concrete brushes here, the kind of old school way before Surface Painter, are really required because they get it seamless rather than having a really weird kind of jagged seam in there. So you see me use these a lot, and probably a lot more than I have kind of anywhere. Especially just for ground cover, because I feel like if I'm going to be using them anyway, why not use the 8x8s and 12x12s instead of a whole bunch of 2x2s and Surface Painter. So it ends up working like that. Doing a little bit of careful adjustment to try and get the new taxiway edges to line up neatly with the old runways. Try and do the first like really rough pass at some sort of high-speed exit there, where it's a smooth curve. I don't really know why anybody would need to land off the runway and immediately dive to the maintenance hangar, though maybe they're like a private jet going to the FBO. And over here, it's time for more kind of small secondary and tertiary facilities for the airport. So it's a nice little gap. I'm using the hell out of this mobile office building, this portable office, and the Dole garage, both of which are returning from my last episode, just kind of remixed in a different configuration, because they kind of serve the same thing. It's just small airport outbuildings. We get a little parking lot there that ends up perfectly fitting the actual parking lot assets for parking lot roads, which I was probably happier with than I should be. I'm like, ooh, nice. And then I do a little bit of experimentation trying to pave that in as neatly as possible. Because what I was doing is I was just scrolling around a lot of these buildings, and there are some in this exact same place at SFO. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just do these. I use the electrical substations and things as sheds. I desperately look for some sort of matching Dole power plant thing to fit.
like cooling tower?
Like the cooling tower. I'm like, hey, you never know. I find this natural disasters weather radar, and I'm pretty sure we all have natural disasters. If not, I'll just place it back every single episode of mine. But it's almost a perfect match for the real little weather radar outside of that hangar at SFO. So I'm like, you know what? Sold. I'll use it. And now I'm getting to do a very interesting thing. I realized that one of these buildings at SFO is actually the maintenance facility for all of the signs. So I go and grab a bunch of signs and just stick them out in the yard, because that's what they have. Yeah, so it's
awesome.
It's all their spare parts. I wish we could rotate them like onto the back, because it looks like they literally just have piles of the acrylic like inserts. So they just have like, here's a big stack of 8s, here's a big stack of 4s, like a bunch of W's. So I kind of wanted to do that, but I feel like just a bunch of signs kind of cluttered around. I used some farm equipment here that we had lying around, just to act as like frameworks and trailers and things to move stuff. I was just kind of trying to find as much like airport crap as I could almost. Looking around, I suddenly see these like spawn points and things from Ninja Noob Slayer, because I'm looking for like, I was 100% sure that we had some sort of like utility trucks or something, and eventually I found some, and these are what I'd imagine. I was looking for like a cherry picker that was like not in the upright position, which we have one that's like deployed, but I was looking for a stored one. I ended up using some Boneyard aircraft flaps there, just because I'm like, that's primo airport related crap. I don't think they'd actually exist there, but they look right. They fill that little space perfectly.
It's plausible.
In theory it's plausible, but they're, maybe in this case, maybe they're like shed pieces that are unbuilt and not flaps. Now I'm getting to grips with the fact that I have a lot of taxiway to cover with crack decals. And
wow, that's quite cracked.
It's quite, but the real thing, so I was amazed by how kind of dirty and unnice the real thing is. I'm not necessarily sure. I know I was talking with you, Strick, about this later.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sold.
Can I say something?
Yes.
When I saw this, when you showed me like what you did, I was like, I think you might have overdone it a bit. And then he like showed me the actual facility in SFO. I'm like, yeah, that looks about right.
It's desperate. Like, I don't know why they haven't repaved that or anything. You'd feel like that's something that would be on their list of priorities.
They need to watch the subreddit for power washing porn.
Yeah, for real.
You'll get some ideas from that. Yeah.
But I go through and I'm just filthing up all of this stuff with these giant coal yard decals. And these I use all over the place just because they're so big. And now comes to my biggest cheat I think I've ever done in FBS, which is just literally just like, that's finished, that looks good. Okay. And I just copy the whole damn thing. And we go through just a little bit of cleanup because I don't want those approach lines. I use a little more decal work just to kind of add some more texture. And this was an attempt at something that I kind of, at the same time, realizing that this is like hundreds of decals, I realized it didn't really get the look that I wanted. Wow. Because there's these really distinctive linear wear patterns on this area of taxiway at SFO that I wanted to try and replicate, but I decided that's probably not quite the right thing for this. So ended up not doing that and just going and once again copying a different section of airport, cleaning it all up as best as I could to remove the gate stuff from it. Because I mean, big wide pieces of empty tarmac or empty ramp where you park airplanes kind of look the same no matter what part of the airport you're at.
Pretty much.
So I'm trying as best I can, and we did a really good job, and I'm sure you'll talk about this in your episode next, Strict, about burying decals under decals, which means it's a little bit difficult to pull just the right ones out. Even with only decal filter and everything on. So
there's going to be a decal cleanse in the next episode.
Yes. So this is kind of...
put it mildly.
And well, here's the thing, because now if you're freeing up all those decals, then we get free reign to use these like crazy.
I guess, yeah.
So I'm going back, adding all the wear, adding all the stains and things back to this before just dropping the whole thing in place. And it fits perfectly because I guess areas that are designed to fit a whole bunch of planes just kind of fit a whole bunch of planes. So I stick in a second layer here because that's one of the most distinctive things. This used to be where United Airlines kept all their 747s at SFO, so you'd always see like 8 of these things lined up at the back of the airport, nose to nose. And I really wanted to replicate that, so I ended up really duplicating a lot of these stands, and I realized that my dimensions weren't quite as, like, I eyeballed it for real, and then I realized it wasn't quite right, so it ended up having to do kind of a substantial amount of surgery here after I do a little more ploppable asphalting. But I did a lot of surgery because I'm like, wait a minute, you can't fit a plane through there and backing up, and it ended up just the whole thing a little too tight. So some changes are about to come, kind of after I detailed everything, which was very frustrating to find out. It's like, no, it was all done. Kind of went, I was really looking at this back, like I thought I was being very cohesive and like finishing one job then moving on, but apparently not. Like, good God, it's just going nuts. So we have a lot more decals here as kind of the entryway to the hangars. They're very distinctive at SFO, so I figured that they're worth replicating here. So going through, realized that I had forgotten half the doors on this hangar. So place them there, do a little bit of a rearrangement because I had...
I have a question about that rearrangement. Mm-hmm. Are planes usually like parked kind of like a showroom? Or you just did that to show off the planes?
Well...
or both?
Kind of. It really depends. I've seen some that are parked very tightly like that for more long-term storage. I'd imagine it would not be quite as so for, I guess, times when you have, like, actually to do maintenance. You'd probably have it a little less dense than that.
They look good, though. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
I was just curious if that's actually a thing.
I did kind of want to show off the planes, so it's a little bit showroomy. And you'll especially see that when I add showroom lighting to every single hangar bay. Like, beautiful uplighting, making sure the light colors were correct and everything.
Nice.
But it was really only now when I realized how large of a project this was. Because I was placing these airplanes and look at them, I'm like, oh God, this, like... That's a giant wide-body plane, and it's just being swallowed by the actual space here. So right now I figured this kind of stand right here would be for smaller planes, so I spaced them out with 737s, which I haven't made for our airlines yet. So I ended up having to sub them back out for some flex transport ones, which I'm trying to use the new airlines as much as I can for these outside parts, because I'm making them with a much more concerted effort for them to be interesting looking from the top and not just white. So yeah, I'm trying to use the new ones as much as possible. Now just to connect all the stuff at the back, which was really complaining about not getting any attention, not getting any traffic, police, whatever. I had previously gone and used the little 1x1 truck spawners and things just to try and make vehicles like satisfy the demand and stuff. But I was a little curious as well as to if that parking lot was going to draw enough cars, and ultimately I don't think it does. Then I kind of get at the area with a little bit of terrain paint, which was nice to do, and just kind of keep going. This was a little beta test for what you're going to see next time. I decided to check out some of these runway shoulders. I think I sent this to Strict. I'm like, hey, you got an episode next to do. But I wanted to see...
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I wanted to see what
it's
was
worth it. It's totally worth it, though.
It's so worth it.
It is. So this is a little sneak preview. I'm like, oh crap, I have it saved, so I don't want to like wreck this runway, so I put everything back the way it was previously, very carefully. So I'm like, okay, I think that's safe. I think we're good right now. And then I start looking and realizing that we're kind of getting close to the sort of stuff that I'm not really ready to build yet. I need to do more research, so I end up kind of coming back and just doing a little more finishing of jobs. I was trying to stay off of doing a ton of taxiway work this time because I knew that we had a potential refactor inbound. So I wanted to get them finished in some way, but maybe not like perfectly polished because that would be a little bit of a waste of time. So I'm studying some lines. I'm trying to figure this out because one thing that's different from this airport to the real thing at SFO is that connects to a much longer, wider taxiway. So I'm trying to figure out where like the ramp entrance might be for this, because this little taxiway section and network right in front of it is a little redundant, maybe. Though I think it's mostly realistic, because you'd end up with an area to stage planes, you'd end up with an area to do a bunch of stuff. But I'm doing a bunch of research right now, and you can see actually very clearly, I'm probably going to cut most of this out, but you can see very clearly the new runway or taxiway line decals there in like mac and cheese orange. Wow, how long did I sit here? Did I pause the video?
That's quite a bit of research.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
What happened? Did my render break?
Like for a moment, I checked my player to see if it was
still
like,
playing, for sure. I'm gonna cut this out, definitely. But crap, did my render not work?
I don't want to skip forward and like mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, I think we
let's-
kind of have to sit here.
Let's just write it.
Oh my god.
All right.
If you did this much research, man, props to you. Like,
Wow, that's
Yeah.
I
Well.
feel so bad with my research.
Okay. There we go. All right. So we're back after a little video pause somehow. That might have been when I was sending pictures and things and asking like, are these lines okay? And the answer was they're a little mac and cheese orange. So we end up changing these out next time by getting Mobius 1 and Vasimir both to make us new ones, which is extremely kind of them, and they look a lot better than these ones. These ones are really good to have just still, and I'm not super upset with them, but they just kind of stand out.
The thing with these is, I mean, they look great actually, just by default. Aside from the fact that they're in this orange, like radioactive orange, but the main issue is that we're trying to get in touch with the creator of this, and the last comment on this asset is literally, "I'm not planning on changing this." So, like, yeah,
that becomes a hard sell.
yeah, pretty much.
We end up going to somebody else who will hook us up with some fantastic assets next episode. So look forward to those. And now, Flux, I join you briefly in taxiway marking hell.
Welcome.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you were kind of right. It was a little zen. It was not quite as bad as I thought. I got to mark this out, and this was shocking. So I spent a little bit of time scrolling around the airport looking for a free letter, and the highest free letter I could find was W, which tells you a little bit about the scale of this airport. So I
we
add
really went
text.
through a lot of letters.
And we had some. It's like we have C1 through 4, and then we are still on W. So this is the intersection of C4 and W, and I add W and X to this right now at least, which is crazy to me. Turns out I did all the signs backwards, so a little bit of move it fun to squeeze everything back into the right spots.
Have you used the align height in general?
I did.
Move it.
I have used the align height. It's fantastic.
It's so amazing.
And it helps a lot with some of these. So I had align height on and then terrain following off. So they're as lined up vertically as they can. I think they're still misaligned horizontally a tiny bit, but
I asked Samsung about that if it was possible to have a line horizontally and the same as align height, and he said he's gonna look into it. So
that would be amazing for these to get them like perfectly rectangular. But going through and adding all these signs. It's very interesting. I had to do, as we know already, I did a bunch of research, but about markings and things, about ramps in particular. So this is actually the wrong marking, but it's as close as we had at the time. I think we have a new one now. That's the dashed double yellow, and then a single yellow, which is like a hold. And then I'm using an old school prop line to drop in the ramp marking. So basically, I believe once you're inside those lines, you'll hold at that hold marker to cross the road, and then once you're inside those lines, you're now taken care of by the ramp instead of by the ground controller. So that's kind of the end of the ground controller's jurisdiction. You saw right there, that's where I was shifting and shuffling all this stuff to give some more wingtip clearance. In here, I realized that, like, man, I'm pretty high on the prop count for this, and it's not really doing much by just providing all these little lines, which are actually very heavy. And I figured I could do what they actually do at the real Super Bay at SFO, which is just the little plane stand markings. And of course, I have our usual problem of trying to get white ones at all cost. So a little bit of fumbling around later, a little bit of realizing I kind of pasted the planes in misaligned. And then one of my favorite things is how tightly they're tucked in together. At SFO, they kind of tessellate in this really nice way. So I did that, condensed everything, got a little bit of extra room in there. And then continued to experiment with our lines, which were really fun. And it's just being able to change these so quickly and easily after the fact and just tweak the radius and contours and everything is so nice compared to Prop Line Tool, which is already super nice compared to having to do it with individual props. But being able to do this and being able to just paste and paste and paste and then kind of tweak and adjust as necessary is fantastic. And it really feels like a whole new game. Almost like the level of detail that you can do quickly has changed so much thanks to these. So doing these really cool fish-shaped little taxiway markers to get people into the bay, and as usual, or as with the with those huge gates I did at the international terminal, there are markings for large planes and small, like one large plane or two small planes to enter. So I'm doing the same thing here, trying to figure out how to move stuff around, because it is very close when you have planes sticking out there. So I end up deciding, I'm like, oh, I've got a little bit of room on one side. Let's just move the entire building over again, which of course requires, because everything was almost done, a whole bunch of moving of decals and things. Now we jump to nighttime, and as I was saying, we get the showroom lights. Looking for something that's not quite as like flashy ground lights. And I end up only doing the flux transport terminal in this way with the 4 ground lights. I really wanted to take advantage of the glass in the roof. So Ronix added some of the rotor shader glass into the roof of these. So I ended up grabbing the airport lights, and first I placed them all around outside like you'd expect, kind of where wings won't go, basically. That's, from what I could tell, that's where they put these lights for these maintenance areas, is just where you can be sure that nobody's wing will hit. I used it in the parking lot as well. I figured that, like, you know what, it was probably all built at once. And then I realized they're actually a really good height to stick inside of this with very few props, with very few kind of that all set up. So I shrink them down a little bit and stick them inside, and you end up with this awesome look of lights inside the hangars. And of course, now we can check out this beautiful cinematics again. And it
Beautiful.
is definitely not just a black screen. for
Gorgeous.
us. Hey, I like to record those afterwards because if we spend a lot of time talking about the thing, like this is, I guarantee you right now, there's gonna be a nighttime shot. It's gonna transition to it now. It'll be this beautiful nighttime shot of the hangars and everything.
On point. That was
see?
the timing there was
Nailed it.
I know, right?
crazy.
But I just want to make sure, and it's definitely not because I'm super lazy and recorded this, finished the time lapse, finished the time lapse 2 a.m. on the day before Park Life came out, and didn't want to do that.
That was actually a good call because the save was broken for 24 to 48 hours.
It was a disastrous 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like we could thank the modders for helping us get FBS up and running so quickly after the patch here. And with that, I'm going to hand it to you, Strict, once again
Thank you.
for episode 15 of our 6-part airport series. So thank you guys very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to all of us to get the right stuff, and I will see you next time.
Goodbye.